Welcome.
Hey there.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thanks for being on. The two of you met as freshmen in college. How did you meet? Like, is this like freshman orientation?
Who wants it?
Well, I'll start by saying I took one look at that hair and I said, which wasn't quite like that. Do you remember the show Jersey Shore?
Yeah.
He was more like Pauly D. He had a blowout.
It's called a blowout, yeah.
But he was from Boca Raton, so I called it the Boca blowout. And I said, I took one look. I was like, who's that tall, handsome man with the very tall hair? I have to know him. But I'm not even kidding. Like, he did have very tall hair. And he had a big smile. We had a couple mutual friends, actually. My close friend who was also from the Philadelphia area. There were very few of us down in college in Florida. They were pledge brothers. He was my good friend. I was kind of being put in the friend zone by the friend.
Oh yeah.
And eventually Doug and I
Thanks,
Doug and I found our way back to each other.
Yeah,
really
I was becoming very close with this guy, Dan, who's still a wonderful friend to this day, was my college roommate. And I was kind of like, dude, we're off the pot here, because I was catching feelings for this girl who was unlike anything I had experienced in South Florida. It was a Philly girl, and we had Birkenstocks and curly hair and all this.
I wasn't your typical SEC.
Yeah.
SEC sorority girl. I showed up with a tie-dye t-shirt and cut-off shorts and Birkenstocks, and was like,
really
wait,
cool.
I was supposed to dress up for this?
Yeah.
What?
You could tell she was different, and I was just like, hey, you want to come get some sushi with some of my fraternity brothers? As horrible as that sounds.
What could be a better first date than Douglas, myself, and 10 of his fraternity brothers?
Yeah, it was good, and the rest is history. No, and we just kept seeing each other, and that was all of college.
Did you have observations about how one another spent money during your college days?
Oh, yes.
Definitely.
Oh, yes. I mean, I think, so I'm an only child and grandchild on both sides of my family. My parents got divorced right as I entered my teenage years. And I really embodied a lot of the scarcity mindset that my mom kind of imparted on me during those years. There was a lot of, we don't have, a lot of money stress in our house. Whether that was true or not, that's not really, and we write about that in the book too. It doesn't really matter what was. What matters is how you felt about it in those earliest years and your earliest money memories. When I went to college, it was kind of this blank slate. It was the first time in my life that I was truly on my own. And I was really trying to navigate a lot of mixed messaging that I was given. Both, I had the scarcity mindset on one side. I had my father on the other side, who was already remarried by then and living a different life. He came from wealth, and there was family money on his side. But I wasn't receiving a lot of attention. And so the way that money kind of commingled with this idea of, like, when you give money, you're giving love. When you withhold money, you're withholding love. And so the more that I wasn't having my needs met from an attention and a emotional support standpoint from my father, money was very much tied into that. And Doug really had a front row seat to that. And so, I remember doing things that were silly in college. Like, I remember anytime my debit account got low, and I remember feeling like there was a lack of attention.
Yeah.
I can't explain it, because
I saw that a bunch of times.
I was really on top of it. So what would happen would be, like, I wouldn't speak to my dad for 6, 7, 8 weeks at a time, which is kind of strange when I look back. And I would say, well, I'm going to go out and I'm going to overdraft my debit account and see if that gets his attention, to see if he'll call me then, which was like, obviously that's like not. That's not
It's
how
a healthy relationship with money, and it tied into a lot of the lessons that you learned around money early on. It shaped a lot of, what we've spent a lot of time, working through together to ultimately find ourselves in a good spot. I got to see a lot of that. I can recall some stories of my own around that. And we were very opposite, I think, in this regard. I mean, I was taught that money helped you build. I mean, I came from a family of serial entrepreneurs. My father worked with his father. They built a business together. I watched my own father build a financial advisory practice. My brother and I were encouraged to, build businesses of our own. And we fixed computers on the weekend back when, everyone, the personal computer revolution. Like we were privileged to always have computers in the household. And
you always had the tools to not only make money, but Doug had the tools to really understand how money was a vehicle that helped him to get whatever it was he wanted.
But that created a lot of confidence, though. Like I never worried about having money on the weekends because I could make $100 in 2 to 3 hours of helping a lovely senior citizen in South Florida get on AOL. And $90-$100 on a weekend in the early 2000s, that's more money than you probably need. That's trouble right there.
Well, I always worked multiple jobs too, like both from high school into college and after college. Yeah. But just, again, the fear and the emotional entanglement and enmeshment between money and love and support in my life was just so messed up that I couldn't even see that I had all the tools at my disposal to be in control because I just was still looking for something. It was never about the money. I was looking for something else, and money was just totally enmeshed in that conflicts, in all those conflicts in my family.
So what I'm hearing from you then are these themes of insecurity and scarcity as it relates to your early money story. And then Doug, from you, confidence. In a relationship in particular, that could create an imbalanced power dynamic.
Of course.
When you've got one partner who's highly confident with money and another who's feeling very insecure with money, it could create this dynamic in which you cede your power to the more confident partner.
Of course.
Yeah, we see that a lot.
And this is exactly one of the points that we try and make in the book about being wary about the way you speak to yourself about your financial challenges from the past, your financial missteps, or even just things that didn't go the way you wanted them to. It's incredibly important about the way to understand the way that you perceive those mistakes and that you don't embody them to have it take a hit on your confidence so that you don't believe you deserve to have a say in your household finances moving forward. And to that point as well, you have to be very cautious and mindful of the way your partner speaks about your financial mistakes, your financial missteps, and the things that they wish could have gone differently. Because yes, all of these things 100% play into the power dynamics in your relationship. We saw it firsthand.
It's why we highlight just how important the beginnings of your life and experience with money are, right? Heather got to that point based on her journey in her life by her parents going through what they went through. I got to where I got to because of what my parents taught me. And this could be shaped by your experiences that have trauma or don't. It could be shaped by your culture, your religion. It could be shaped by so many things. And you live a lot of life before you meet your partner. I've had the privilege of knowing Heather for more than 20 years. We've been married a long time. We've known each other longer. I've heard the stories and I, as Heather said, bore witness to them. But we're probably more of an exception than the rule here, which is most people live a ton of life before you meet that person that you're going to spend the rest of your life with. How much do you know about that? Like, how much do you really understand what it felt like? You might know a story or two. You might know your partner had food insecurity or grew up with an immense amount of privilege. We found out through our interviews what that actually meant to people. And that's why in partnerships, it's important not to have a race to the bottom of who had it worse or who had it best. Everyone's entitled to feel the way that they felt about their particular experience with money. And until you start to gain the perspective of how your partner felt, you're going to have a very difficult time coming together to rectify those imbalances that might exist. There are definitely going to be imbalances, but how are you going to go about finding fairness between the two of you and what you've experienced?
When it comes to something as fundamental as your confidence with money, in the pursuit of achieving that fairness, I mean, there's of course as you just spoke about, the importance of making sure that you understand one another. You have that empathy, that you're not shaming one another for each other's mistakes. In addition to the emotional understanding, there's also confidence in just the tactical doing. And particularly when you're young and you're learning all of this stuff for the first time, you're still figuring out the tactical doing. How do you balance all of that? Like how, as you guys were embarking on your financial journeys together, as young adults, how did you approach those conversations about how much money you're going to put into a retirement account versus a down payment savings versus fixing the headlights on that car that you had that
Thomas,
the engine
that old car. Yeah, exactly.
We were really thrown into the thick of things. I think that our experience together was such an extreme example. So what happened was, we're elder millennials. When I chose to move to New York City for law school, I took out 6 figures of student loan debt.
Multiple.
I looked at the employment statistics I thought I was making an incredibly sound decision. I said, this is an investment in my future.
$200,000 of student loan debt.
$200,000 of student loan debt. I sat with the financial aid officer at the school, said, can I afford this? How does this make sense? Like sit with me, show me, because I didn't really have the family infrastructure at the time to really help guide those financial decisions for me. I sat with the financial aid officer and they said, well, here is a chart of the employment statistics for graduates from our school, and this is the salary band and the average salary, and you should be able to pay back these loans in XYZ year. It made sense at the time. That was 2007. So I was in law school during the years when Lehman collapsed. I was there. I watched my on-campus interviews go from 30 down to 2.
Dust.
Literally they disintegrated in my fingers. And so the way that we definitely were in a bit of survival mode. And by the way, survival mode in our own relationship too. Doug, we did not know whether we were going to
I didn't move up to New York right away. There's a lot of doubt as to whether or not this would all work out.
There was a lot of doubt. There was a lot of trust, a lot of lack of trust between the two of us during that time, because I had found myself in such an extreme situation.
You became lost pretty quickly.
I did. And I was truly drinking from the hose of my own life, figuring out, did I just make the biggest mistake that's going to follow me for the rest of my life? And how much am I going to punish myself for this? And that thinking and destructive behavior went on for several years, financially, emotionally, everything. So
that was the biggest challenge in, navigating our financial lives together. And don't mean to cut you off, but it wasn't like, how do we share a bank account?
That's right.
It wasn't, well, who's going to pay for what? It's, how are we going to build a life together when we have, student loan debt to contend with? More important than that was, how are we going to get Heather's mindset of one where she's feeling helpless, feeling lost, and feeling like she made a mistake, and the shame that came with it? Because at no point in time, despite that loan balance, did I think there wasn't a solution or a path we could go down that would get us to where we needed to be. That was the entrepreneur in me. I mean, I went up to New York on a whim, walked away from the family business.
He went up there with a duffel bag and a dream.
No joke. I went up with
true.
I had to sell my car, borrow some money from my mom because it was a lease I had to buy out. I shipped up 4 boxes and went to Sleepy's on 5th to get a very cheap mattress and room with some guy we met on Craigslist. Shout out Mitesh. And my experience was like that, and honestly, it was beyond exciting, but it still had to contend with watching the entire financial world melt down before my eyes.
But so we didn't reach that moment of that. What do we want for us as a couple? What do we want out of this partnership in our lives? Like,
we just didn't want the boat to
we
sink
just
into
had
the
to
water.
Survive for most of our early adult years here. We just said, what can we do to stay here? Let alone what do we actually want? We weren't even in a position to even talk about what we wanted for a while. So I think I just don't want that.
Yeah, we weren't very we couldn't really afford to be choosy here. We simply had to find a way through it.
And, with something like that, coming out of law school into a job market that sucks because it's the Great Recession, while you've got all of that student loan debt, like what strikes me about your story is that I think mentally it would have been very different if your story was, ever since I was a little girl, I felt a calling from above to be an attorney.
That's right.
Said no one ever.
Right. Then this was my dream. And even though it doesn't make sense, this is clearly what I was put on this earth to do.
That's right.
Right. And sure, if that's the feeling that you have when you're going through law school, then this is a blip in what is a much bigger, more purposeful calling.
That's right.
But that's not your story.
That is not my story. My dream in life was to be a journalist and to be a writer. And I went to undergrad to be a journalist. And I ended up in law school for a lot of the reasons we were just talking about earlier, which was I was desperate for financial independence from that feeling, not just from my parents, but from that feeling, the scarcity feeling. I never wanted to need anyone ever again because I carried so much shame from being caught between my parents in those teenage years and being caught between feeling like I was compelled to ask my father for things, not knowing what the answer was going to be, not knowing whether I'd receive an answer because the question I was asking wasn't, can you take me for a pair of jeans because I need a pair of jeans? The question was like,
do you love me?
Yeah. Do you love me? How much? So when I think about why I became a lawyer, like it was one of those things that kind of made sense in the narrative of elder millennial lore of like, how can we self-optimize and continue this climb, right? How can we just continue to invest in ourselves? That was very much the narrative. It wasn't just for me. That was what the schools, higher education was selling at that time, and nobody was questioning it at that time. It was a responsible thing to do. Well, you can always use a law degree. I'll never forget, like, that's what you can always use a law degree.
Right.
And so
it's practical, it's useful.
It's practical, it's useful, it's responsible.
Well, that's what that's what I thought. And I mean, I wasn't mature enough then to, be able to pull you aside and have the conversations we would probably have today. I thought she was making a good decision too. I remember telling you after college, go to whatever school you think is going to be best for you.
And it wasn't just that. It wasn't just go become a lawyer and go to law school. It was go to the best school that you get into.
Yeah.
That's I wish that narrative broke even more, but it still feels like when I speak with
when you think you're buying
teens and families today, that there's still some of that out there, and that's not really how you calculate the ROI.
Yeah, well,
right?
They're buying insurance policies, not investments. The insurance policy that it will work out, and that your child or you yourself making that decision will, be able to hedge against the risks of it not working out and not being successful. And that's a whole other conversation around the dynamics between parents and their kids in higher education.
Yeah, you see that especially, I think, with immigrant families,
sure.
Which I come from, because there is that you want the certainty that especially when you lack a social support network in this country, you want the certainty.
And it gets so much even more twisted when you realize that a lot of these decisions are made so that it's the parents that want to be the ones that look good, like they've achieved. Look at the child that I produced in this world. Forget that they have no interest in the thing that I've pushed them into, or don't even mesh well at this wonderful, institution that they're now attending. Forget all that for a moment. Look what I was able to do. And that's a big part of it as well. But again, we could spend all day on higher education, why, kids turn out the way that they do.
So tell me then about what happened, your story in 2008, 2009, 2010. How did you come out of this dilemma, both professionally, but also in your relationship and in the way that the two of you related to one another as you were beginning your post-collegiate phase of life?
I think after figuring out what we would be doing, I always knew I would be working in personal finance, and I knew what my goal was, to become a financial advisor with his own practice. But getting to that end result would, be something we had to figure out. But Heather was very supportive and knew that is something that I wanted to do, and had the training to do that and the experience from the time I did work in my family business and working with my father. And Heather already committed to the legal profession.
We had figured out pretty quickly that I didn't like it.
Yeah.
I didn't like my time in private practice.
Hold on, but you were able to find, despite the economic circumstances, while your expectations were down. Yeah, she really did.
Job.
I mean,
I had several job offers.
Hundreds and hundreds of applications I saw her put out in the world. There's no one who works harder than Heather, and she was able to secure a job in the legal profession. Was it the one that was offered or suggested that you would get in the financial aid office? Nowhere close to it,
Right.
But we found ourselves working in our respective fields and crafts, and ultimately taking those initial steps to figure out how we would dig ourselves out of student loan debt. I, by the way, threw another $100,000 of student loan debt on top of that by going to business school, as kind of this contra example of how the, investment in yourself in school could go right, and finding a pathway to get that return on the investment. And again, we supported each other in these endeavors.
I think there were two major turning points for us in our relationship with money, and that really set us up for our adult lives and for things to start going the way we wanted them to. One, when I decided after a couple of years of being underpaid and overworked in private practice, I found myself working in a more of a corporate setting. And I went to a large Fortune, at the time they were a Fortune 50 company, to go do in-house work there. The hours were a lot more manageable. Yes, I took a slight pay cut from where I ended up at that time, but pound for pound, given the amount of the amount of hours I got back in my life and the way that I felt, and having an HR department and working in a place that felt like a supportive environment with colleagues and just a really
it's no fun when you're straight up told don't make weekend plans, because remember your BlackBerry is going to blow up and you need to jump into action. That is that's not very sustainable.
But so I had found myself, and but that was a joint decision to say, you're going to take a slight pay cut right now so that you can gain some stability in your life, because that stability is more important to us than that extra, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, which feels like a lot of money. It is a lot of money, especially when you're in your 20s.
And you have those kind of liabilities.
But when I tell you every day was truly like another horror show, and for Doug to watch me start my career like that, like I was on a one-way path to complete burnout and to leaving the profession as a whole, as a lot of people are. A lot of young attorneys feel this way. So to take a step back and kind of look for a legal adjacent role in that moment was very important for us, in our relationship, and for me professionally. And at the same time, it allowed Doug to take some risks in his career. I mean, he's an entrepreneur. He was trying to build a book of business. He was trying to grow and get clients and put himself out there in the world and build platforms online. Me having stability, even at a lower salary band, was more valuable to us as a couple
100%.
than anything.
Yeah, she gave us the foundation to build. For the builder, hey, like, what do I need here? I need concrete on the ground, and Heather did that.
I want to mention too that there was a moment, and a lot of like I said, like trust played into us healing our relationship with each other and kind of growing up together. And for me, I needed to trust that I could rely on somebody. That was something that I had a really hard time with. Even all these years that I knew Doug, I didn't believe that I was worthy of having someone to support me and love me like that. So in this moment...
Oh, no problem, babe.
No, but I want to talk about the student loan debt.
Absolutely. I know. That's number 2 here.
We had an opportunity to refinance our student loan debt with the private bank. They took Doug's because he went to Stern, he went to NYU, and they took his, and they're like, this man is a high potential man. Yeah. And then they looked at me and they said... I sat down
with a banker in a top hat and a mustache.
And a monocle.
Welcome to the bank.
I mean, I'll give it a big eye roll, but like that's what they did. They're like, well, look at him, high potential, right? No, and then they were like, well, all right, we'll take yours too, but he's got a cosign. But
they had offered, and they still wanted a cosign, and we punted a year on this simply because we wanted like the flexibility of the income-based repayment plan. Like we were still establishing ourselves.
We thought there were still going to be like real opportunities to actually have loans forgiven.
I don't even know if it was forgiveness as much as it was those repayment plans were extremely flexible, and I knew how to game them in such a way that we could give ourselves the flexibility we needed, because I wasn't 100% confident with what the future looked like for the business. It was still the early aughts of building. Right. But then, we got to a point where it's like, what are we doing? Like, we have to, address this now. I think they came back. They're like, hey, you want to handle this? And they said, we need your signature here too, Doug. And I was like, absolutely. Like, this is such an opportunity that we cannot afford to pass up. I wasn't thinking about what Heather is about to tell you in terms of what it did. I was just like, this makes absolute financial sense. We were married. I am in it to win it with this one right here. Why on earth would I not? What was mine was already yours. That was my thinking, but Heather will tell you what it really did.
Spoken like someone whose parents were still married.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I think, for me, this was truly the largest demonstration of loyalty and love and care, support and belief in me as a person, as a partner, that anyone, more than us getting engaged, this was the biggest and biggest gesture he's ever made towards me because of what those loans represented to me.
Co-signing those loans?
Yes, because of what they represented to me, because the loans to me were the loans were not, they were not just a deficit in my life. I was the deficit. And so his willingness to do that was just the ultimate
It was
gesture.
it was a game changer, I think, for, what we're getting to here in the conversation, which is, how did we go from so she went from giving me this foundation. I guess in turn, I was able to remove shame and allow her to feel like everything she was doing mattered in terms of her contribution to what we were building together. And that was a huge breakthrough.
It also gave me back, it gave me the space to rebuild a mindset that said, you are in control of your life. You are in control of your career.
Yeah.
And you certainly deserve to have a say in our financial decisions in this family.
Remember,
and you it's wild how easy it is to lose that when you're buried in your own shame.
Remember how I said we didn't really have a lot of optionality when we first embarked on our adult journey together? I ended up getting more optionality as the business grew. And up until that moment, I don't know if you necessarily felt like you had many options as well until, that moment there. And that's when things got a lot more fun and exciting as our family grew. And we did some things that, obviously, fill us with joy and happiness. But, that doesn't go on forever. And we'll talk about how, these cycles of growth ultimately lead you to making other decisions you need to consider before you can get into the next phase of growth. So I
really have a lot of sympathy for couples and young adults in their 20s and feeling like every decision is a linear one that leads you further down a path and that there's no way off the path. And that's not really how life feels. Like when you look back, like I just turned 40 2 months ago.
Happy birthday.
Thanks. New decade.
Welcome to
new era.
Welcome to the club.
No, but if I could look back and just tell her that this path you're on is not forever, that you do have choices. There are detours from the path. There are forks in the road, and there's seasons in your life. Like it's not just I got myself into this legal career, like you made your bed, lie down in it for the rest of your life, which is truly, I think, how a lot of people feel.
Right.
And I just, if I could tell anyone anything, it's that we live our life in seasons, and there will be another one.
Right. And what you do in your 20s is not indicative of anything.
No.
That might unfold in your 40s
I hated my
or 50s.
mid-20s. I did not like 24, 5, or 6. I felt like it was puberty all over again, except your body's not changing. Like you're not really respected by people older than you. Like the adults really don't think you're an adult, and you're definitely not a kid or a child anymore. So you're really just kind of lost in this awkward moment in time. That's the way that I felt about it. So for all the mid-20 somethings out there who feel that way,
right,
seems to be, normal.
You're old enough to be an adult.
Yeah.
But you're not yet old enough to be taken seriously by adults.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not a girl, not yet a woman.
No,
sorry, I had to say that. I don't know if you'll edit that, but
no, I also just
100%. Yeah.
I think you lack context.
Right.
Too.
Yeah.
You lack context for the grand scheme of your life and for the things that are actually important. And it's no fault of your own, because these institutions like higher education are optimizing you to build and grind and grow and to continue to better yourself. And like no one's telling you that you are bettering yourself by being a part of a community, by being a good friend, by being a good partner and being a good daughter and a good sister. No one's telling you that. They're telling you that your value is connected to what you produce. That's what you are taught up to that point. So you lack context.
We're also at a point where the very institutions we plug ourselves into, whether it be corporate institutions or educational institutions, the time in which that those frameworks were built are further and further, if not more than ever, disconnected from the realities of today.
Right.
From the motivations of the demographics that are stepping into power, that are stepping into money, right? That's Gen X and millennials, right? We still see this lingering effect of stuff that was made at the turn of a century. And by the way, not 99 into 2000.
Yeah, not the Y2K. Yeah.
1899 into 1900, These are very out of touch and often unrelatable things that are trying to connect to, generations that simply don't operate that way. And we see those effects, I think, playing out in real time. And we see it particularly in the conversation around money, the gendered tropes that exist around money, who does what in the household, who's meant to believe that their earning power is their self-worth and their contribution to families and the family unit. These are systemic things that we luckily are breaking away from, but the difficulty factor is super high, especially when those in power are unwilling to relent it or pass the baton onto those who are ready, willing, and able to do it. And that's a very much commentary of moment in time. And we try and tie that into money, right? And our relationship with it. All of these powers and structures play a role in how we think about money and arguably make it more challenging. And even to put a modern twist on this, the information that we consume, sure, like we're watching 1950s films where again, it's very much gendered, but we also see it in social media and what we consume and the pressures that come with how to compete against not only your friends, your neighbors, and sometimes even your loved ones. That's not correct, right? That's not going to help us create fairness in our relationship. That's not going to help us be the team and do the teamwork that's required to get to the goals that we share together, to honor the values that don't necessarily come from our parents, but the values that we created ourselves. That's
right.
The opportunity is for us to say, hey, here's what served me very well in my pathway into our relationship.
And here's what has not.
And here's what's not. Let's drop the things that don't. Let's bring the ones from your life and my life that do, and create, when you say create a life together, that's what you're doing, is finding the blend of values that drive your relationship and life forward so that you can find happiness and fulfillment and fairness. And somehow money is at the core of all of this. And, we really enjoyed exploring that.
When I hear you talk about that area of your life, your mid to late 20s, that not a girl, not yet a woman phase, what I hear from you is a lot of mutual teamwork. I hear a lot of mutual support. And, Heather, you built this base while he was building out that book of business, right? So you provided that support, the stability, so that Doug could be an entrepreneur and take some risks. Doug, you had the confidence, to say, hey, I feel confident about money and I feel confident that we're going to be okay, and I want you to know that we're in it together and I'll co-sign for this loan.
That's right.
I hear a lot of back and forth mutual support. And yet I also know that there are many other couples out there where that feeling of mutuality is not necessarily always there.
Yeah.
And there are probably couples who are listening to this who feel as though they are in a situation that is asymmetric. They feel as though they have a partner who's maybe withholding certain information from them. Could be as nefarious as lying, or it could be as, oblivious as they just don't think to include them in certain information.
Or they just don't know how to talk about it because money was never talked about in their household growing up. And they just don't know how to have the conversation.
Exactly.
Or share their feelings around something. Tuck it under the rug.
Right.
It's very common, especially when we're talking about ambition. We believe that couples should have somewhat of a collective ambition. My win is your win. Your win is my win. This is the opposite of a bean counting, keeping a scorecard type of thing where we say, well, you got to do X, Y, Z. Now I'm going to, from a retaliatory standpoint, do X, Y, Z because that keeps us even.
Yeah.
Fair is not always even, right? And again, this goes back to this idea of seasons in your life. There may be a season where more of our family needs, attentions, funds, and support needed to go to Doug to build that. Because that's what it required. Like that was the season that he was in. But you also have to recognize that there's two sides to this coin, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because an investment, whether we're talking about a financial investment or a time investment, an investment in one thing is inherently a sacrifice in something else.
Mm-hmm.
And in the context of a relationship, that means that to invest in Doug's career, to invest in this firm, there were opportunities that maybe I did not go for. There were things that I had to do to support him that required a sacrifice of my time and energy in service of what our goal was for him. Now, this is a wonderful, wonderful thing, so long as you're, one, recognizing it, acknowledging it, and talking about it, right? Because there does come a point where that's all well and good for a season, but you deserve a season as well.
Seasons change, and it did for us. Right. We ultimately, after building this foundation and getting our financial house in order and prospering by watching the business that was being built flourish, we got to a point, particularly through the pandemic, where the scale tilted so far the other way. We put ourselves in a position where I was out earning Heather 3 or 4 to 1, while she was arguably working 3 jobs. She was being a lawyer full time. She has always been my co-pilot and co-founder for the most part for this business that we
moonlighting
built.
as Doug's business consultant at night.
No major decisions were being made by simply me. It'd always be a conversation between the two of us, and that takes emotion and that takes energy to help guide me.
And I was holding the majority of the cards for our family.
Yeah,
I was
without a doubt during that time as we were marooned in our cruise ship to nowhere during those very strange years of COVID. Heather was in overdrive on all the things that were needed to do to occupy and capture the attention of our kids. I definitely could have done better here, but I was just thrilled. I was on the come up on, all the areas in which I had been building. And it takes a lot to, one, recognize that there are feelings like resentment coming into play here. Heather found out she was plateauing and really not liking that. And again, just what was fair seemed extremely unfair at the time. And ultimately, as someone who loves you dearly, she sat me down and said, "This isn't working." And the last thing in the world I want to hear is that the person I love most in this world is unhappy. And the word resentment, by the way, should be taken very seriously, because if you want to find
when people ask what was the turning point, and you say something like, it was the sock on the steps for the 100th day.
Yeah, I walked over clean laundry instead of bringing it up.
Anything could be the sock.
Yeah.
The sock was just one small piece of the resentment that had been building for several years.
It was the last straw, and it broke, and we sat down and, she explained to me, and what I wanted to just finish the thought on resentment, it's the most corrosive substance to our relationship. And for me, that was extraordinarily scary to say, oh, we cannot and will not go down that road. And it prompted the conversation of what changes needed to take place in order to find ourselves back into fairness. Also, it's important to note that during this time, just about, the one thing Heather didn't have to deal with was the household finances. We were very much in tune with the ins and outs of, our financial lives. And I found, and she found herself, floating further and further away from that because she was busy doing a million other things. And that was the thing that she didn't need to do. So,
which many mothers find themselves when you look and you do like a Monday morning quarterback situation on when women who step away from being involved in their household finances, when that happens, should not surprise anyone that it happens in the years when there's small children, when there's small children now entering your life. Because for women who are carrying the lion's share of the household responsibilities, the actual labor, the physical labor, the emotional labor, and all the invisible labor that oftentimes falls mostly on women, the household finances may feel like the one thing you are not responsible for. It's not something that you can just say like, oh, They just decided they didn't want to be involved anymore. That's not it. It's when you're drowning in everything else. And this feels like the only thing that's safe because you know that they're going to do it.
Yeah,
I mean,
100%.
like, that's how that happened. And it's crazy because that was not...
It's a compound fracture because and you find yourself giving up power when you do that by just attaching yourself from the financial, welfare of the household. It is, again, corrosive and in multi layers here. So what we did is figured out what that next pathway forward was going to look like. And ultimately, it resulted in us working together, something we had always wanted to do. And working on this project, Money Together, which, after some trial and error of what ultimately our first, months and years of working together would look like, we went to the thing that, we knew as a team we did really well, which was create some thought leadership and get behind a mission that we really believe in. And here we are, 3 years later since joining, 2.5 years since starting this, and we're still married.
We're still married.
Right.
Well, and your kids were 3 and 1 when the pandemic began?
11 months, and
4. Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Actually, I remember to this day that Ruby, our younger daughter, just on the day of lockdown, March 13th, 2020, I'll never forget, pulled herself up on the coffee table for the first time.
Yeah,
and I said, "Oh, great, she's mobile." Great.
She only has 4 rooms that she can navigate for the foreseeable future. But yeah, that was obviously a great demarcation.
Pandemic parents of young children,
we see you.
Share a collective trauma that is really hard to understand if you did not go through it.
Tell me more about that.
I mean, there's so much. I don't even know where to begin unpacking it. I'll start with the emotional side of it. It was terrifying. It was a terrifying thought. One,
you were spooked.
What happens if I fall ill? In a way that, in the early years of COVID, early year of COVID, early months of COVID, it wasn't just, am I going to have a fever? This was, do I have my affairs in order if one of us falls ill? I remember standing in the grocery store that last trip and saying, I better run out and get something. And it was like a run on the market kind of thing. And everyone was
run on the banks, run on the supermarket.
It was like everyone was grabbing diapers. And I had this thought of, am I going to be able to get diapers? Am I going to be able to get formula? She was still taking formula. And and everyone was like, do you stand? Like, don't come anywhere near me. And everyone was standing far away. People were fighting.
Wild.
I mean, I carry these memories with me because it was this just extreme version of parenting that was just so consequential. Every decision felt so consequential. And it already does when you're a young parent. You already feel like everything you do could break them, and you're trying to form your own
cranked up
and
to
you're
11.
trying to form your own identity as a parent and your own values and your own risk management protocols of what makes sense for you. And then everything was just dialed up to 100, and every decision felt just so incredibly consequential to the safety and health and survival almost of your family. I mean, like, that's just the emotional side of it. Then there's the side of it, like, I'm a young parent who's trying to perform at a high voltage job where I'm managing, 6-7-figure lawsuits, 8-figure lawsuits, remotely with a team remotely that I used to see in person 3 days a week. And frankly, I was one of the only young parents on my team that had multiple children at home. And, while everyone was trying to be understanding and trying to say, okay, well, so you can't make it on this call because your child is melting down and needs to be fed lunch and they're normally at school during those hours or with a caregiver during those hours. People tried to be as supportive as they can, but there's a difference between tolerance and support. And there is a bit of a gray area in between there. And I mean, this went on for so long and had such an impact on my energy, an impact on my morale, an impact on my ability to just keep showing up every day. Like, the exhaustion was so deep that, like, of course I wasn't doing a great job at my job. I was doing literally everything.
Yeah.
And so, this wasn't a 4-month thing. Like, I remember at the beginning, we're all like, well, we'll see you in June. Maybe we'll be able to all get together in June.
Yeah, they said 2 weeks to stop the spread.
Right.
I took them seriously. I thought it was going to be 2 weeks.
I did too. And though I look at it and I'm like, it really did just extend those years that I refer to as the Bermuda Triangle of my career, from the time that I had my first daughter through most of COVID, really. Because it just felt like, I don't even know where this is going, because I don't know, one, whether I can withstand any more of this.
Yeah.
Two, people are perceiving me differently. I feel like I'm being perceived as unreliable, even though like I'm doing literally everything I can. But I'm the only one who's in this situation. So of course they're not going to turn to me at a time of need. And also what you're dealing with at home to try and balance out the load between the two of us and find some. But there was no way to even do it, because we were both just so like reactionary to what was happening. Because remember, every day was like a new day. Like you never knew. You always thought like maybe the next month will be the month that things return to normal.
Right.
But so like everything was tentative. Nothing felt permanent enough to build systems around. It was just such a difficult time.
Yeah.
I try and find silver linings in these very once in a lifetime. Enough with the once in a lifetime events in our lifetime.
Millennials are used to that.
Yeah. The silver lining, I guess, for us is that an extreme experience that we went through also uncovered and revealed what it is that we needed to do in order to move forward in our lives and get to the next act and stage of what we
galvanized our priorities.
Yeah. Yeah, it really did. So in any extreme situation, if you can survive it and walk away from it, you have to look for the lessons that improve your life and make you cherish or value the things that maybe you didn't previously to that, and maybe put yourself in a new direction. We clearly did put ourselves in a whole new direction. And when you choose to do things like that, and you put in the work, and it's been a lot of work, you inevitably get to find yourself into reaping season, right? So those are the seeds you sow during that time. And now hopefully you get to enjoy and the spoils and the rewards that come from working that hard. And you take that win, right? You deserve that win when you were smart enough and caring enough to listen to each other to figure out how you would continue to walk down, life's path together. And you will find yourself continuously doing this. Life and money, these are things that you don't win at life, and you don't necessarily win at money. You have the luxury of continuing to do it and play that, and hopefully find the next adventure you're going to go on, hopefully with someone you love and your partner, if that's who you're with.
It sounds as though throughout all of this, even in the hard parts, there was excellent communication between the two of you. So when the pandemic unfolded and you were at your wit's end and feeling resentment, you had a good enough relationship that you could say, I am feeling resentment. And actually, and what that requires is self-awareness to understand what you yourself are experiencing. And then beyond the self-awareness, the trust and the communication to say, all right, I'm feeling some resentment. I'm feeling unhappiness. And then, Doug, you had to be receptive to that and say, okay, I hear what you're saying, and I'm going to take that seriously, and I'm going to actually not just pay lip service to it, but really take action on it.
Yeah.
And so for all of those things to be true, the self-awareness followed by the saying, received by the hearing, and then, followed up with doing. That's like 4 things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for a lot of couples, one of those 4 steps breaks down.
Sure. It did for us.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It did for us. I mean, look, we can paint the picture of how it all worked out now. But again, it's one of those things where, no, we were not communicating well during COVID. In fact, I think one of the things that a misconception I think people have is that you're not communicating.
Mm-hmm.
But the truth is, and many couples therapists told us this, is that we interviewed for the book, you're always communicating. You just may not be saying things the way that you want to be saying. You may not be getting your point across. So I was communicating by huffing and puffing around the house and by yelling at everybody and by stomping around and throwing laundry bins everywhere.
But still doing all the work, right?
Right. But I was not communicating that I felt overloaded, that I felt like I was invisible.
That's what I'm saying. That's why I was unable to pick up on it, because despite the huffing and puffing and all of that, laundry was still getting done. Kids are still getting fed. I guess everything's okay over here.
I used to hate this saying that he would have, which is like, it just gets done. And to me, that's the most passive.
You still hate that.
I hate that. I hate that saying. I still hate it because I don't believe that it just gets done. You do it. It doesn't. It's also like grammatically, like he says it just gets done. I'm like, yes, because someone chooses to do it.
Right.
So at the time, there's also this very interesting idea about like power, and you think that the person who's the loudest in the room has all the power, and that is not true. Oftentimes, it's the person who feels powerless that is the loudest, and it's the person carrying the power that can just go on with their day, right?
Well, when I, or the proverbial you, says it just gets done, and one person is doing more of the doing, that is the reaction you will get. But if both people have found fairness, and again, that's not equal. There are things I'm never going to do 50-50 with Heather, and there are things she's never going to do 50-50 with me. But when there's fairness and you say, well, it gets done, it's like, yeah, it does, because we get it done. And as much as my heart says it just gets done, in that moment, it took, it was not received as that. And objectively, that's true because of the unfairness that existed.
One of the biggest hurdles that gets in people's way is not just the way they're communicating, but when they're communicating.
Yeah.
And we were very, very guilty of this. So Doug would come up, like, we always found a way to get into these very consequential decisions at the worst possible time. Like, especially this started during COVID, but really, I guess we've always kind of been
It's when we would come up for air, which would be at very different times. I would come up for air before dinner after that 4:00 meeting, and she would come up for air at like 11 p.m. after the day was done. So we both thought that those respective times were the best time for us to talk about these consequential decisions or the important thing that needed to be communicated.
I'm going to be much more specific than that.
Do it.
It is not a good time to talk about money while you're feeding your kids dinner and getting them bathed for bedtime.
Yep.
And while
you're exhausted at the end of the day.
And everyone's exhausted, and there's probably somebody crying, and you both just finished your work day. That is not going to set the stage for a constructive conversation around money, your goals, around your needs. You're both not at ease. You're both kind of still either you're coming down from a stressful day.
It's a bad environment.
It's just a bad environment. So much about time and place really, really matter. That's only one of the reasons why we like the idea of a money date and why that's so important. And for us, that's not something that has to happen every week, because I think when you set the bar too high, you're setting yourself up to fail, and not everybody has time every week to sit down and check in on these points, especially when you're just getting started. But if you set aside time once a quarter, let's say, and you set aside time in a forum that you both are really comfortable in, or that you both can even, dare I say, look forward to. Like for Doug and I, we love to go for walks. I think this is like a COVID thing that we started. Yeah. Actually, no, I would say it goes back to the city. We always used to walk at night in the city too.
Before that. Yeah,
we're big walkers. We would just go out at night after dinner, and we'd walk till
no shortage of studies on how amazing a walk is for your brain.
But we've always been walkers. We walk through important conversations. That's just always been something that we do. But now also we'd go out for a cocktail. We'd like to sit at the bar at a restaurant, downtown in our town.
And these start to unpack things.
We'd get a babysitter. These were things that we looked forward to doing together. And we knew that the purpose of us going out doing this thing that we like to do together was exclusively to talk about these topics that night. And so we could eventually, we started saving those conversations for those moments instead of hey, I know you're really eager to talk to me about how we did this month because you just put together the spreadsheet and you're really excited you just finished.
It's just 7 o'clock at night. ADHD, baby.
Right. But I'm first of all, a show, there's either a show I want to watch on TV, right? I'm no, this is not the time. And I'm going to brush him off, and he's going to feel slighted, and we're not going to get anything done. But I would say to him, hey, that's awesome that you did that. Do we have that date on the calendar for a week from now? I'm really excited to talk about this. We're going to go through all of it then.
Here's some tips, viewers, for when you're going on your money date, how to begin without feeling like someone doesn't want to be there. And it's important to know that there are some really good ways to go about this and some terrible ways to go about this. Guys, try not to sit down with spreadsheets and, tables and numbers when you could easily start the conversation with goals, things that you both are looking forward to. I will have a much easier time talking to Heather about anything in our financial lives if it's tied to something we both care about or are excited for. Like,
that was very important for us at the beginning when we started doing these conversations in much more of a structured sense. It was very important for me to not just dive right in to those numbers and to the technical. We wanted to start with the positive because I'm a bit of like a negative Nancy.
Yeah.
And I kind of need that like positive reinforcement. Like, here's all the great things.
That's the second one is don't go with the things that need improvement off the bat. No one wants to start a conversation with what's negative. They want to start with what you're doing right. Mm-hmm. And you'll notice that all of this is just simple little tweaks.
Right.
Just turn the thing you were going to do, turn it upside down. What would that look like? Yeah, start with positives. Hey, look how great we did this month with this. High five, take a shot, take a sip, whatever. And that's going to be a much better on-ramp into, well, we do have to talk about the things that need improvement. Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool. Well, we got some, we booked some wins. Where's the L? Here's the L. Okay, we're now more motivated to talk about that. So I think these are just two really great examples, not only time and place, but how you start the conversation. They make a perfect mix to setting the stage for productive sessions. And then the other part I'd tell you is be patient here. If you're setting up quarterly dates, that's only 4 times a year. This is a practice. Anything you want to get good at requires practice. And this type of work compounds. So 4 money dates, great. Over 2 years, 8. I'm just counting by 4 now. 3 years, 12. You start
How many in 4 years?
16, I think.
He's not sure.
I'm unsure. Let me check with my 9th grader. They're doing multiplication now. But these are the things that compound over time. And just appreciate the fact that, if you're doing this quarterly, you only get so many cracks at this. So please make them count. And that's why it's so critical to have kind of best strategies or, best practices in going into these things. And don't expect the world out of your first date. I know how hard. We had more questions at the end of it than we had answers. And then there were slightly less questions. And now we know what the same questions are going to be every time or which areas we need to focus on as we approach money date number, 24 or whatever it is. I counted by 4 again.
Well, the advice about starting with wins, it reminds me of how a lot of team meetings are structured in the workplace, right? Like, you might have a weekly team meeting, like a Monday morning all hands meeting that begins with, all right, what were our big wins from last week?
Sure.
And everyone in the all hands meeting celebrates the big team wins before you go into, all right, what are we working on this week? What are the goals? Overarching big picture, what are the goals for the next 5 days?
Yep. It is a meeting. It is a meeting.
What's so interesting? There are so many positive, constructive communication tools that you can take from your workplace and bring into your household at home. But people don't do it. You know why? Because it's the same reason that my daughter would cry when she gets home from preschool every day, because she saved all of her negative energy for me. That's what they always say. Well, she saved it all for you. She's such a delight at school. And then she comes home and she would yell at everyone and cry and throw herself on the ground. It's funny, but it's not, because it's the same exact thing. It's why do we accuse and yell and deflect and whatever against one another when we do have the communication tools, many of us, like couples who are both really committed to their careers, working through a hard career decision that might require one person to make a sacrifice. You have to give those decisions the time they need, but also you could map it out and do the pros and cons the same way you would with a decision in the workplace. You can use a decision tree. You can work through it. You have the tools. Many people have the tools, but it's a lot easier to just be your hardest on the person that you love the most because you're the most comfortable and your guard is down.
Which reminds me what you maybe in that instance should do instead of, yes, you are hardest and you hurt the ones you love, right? We all know that expression. But so much of this is also knowing how your partner learns and meeting them where they're at.
Oh, yeah. We
had a couple that was struggling to conduct a money meeting and get on the same page. And it started with, here are the they had to talk about the numbers at one point. And even in getting to them in the most constructive way possible, it just wasn't clicking what was on the paper or on the screen. And it was getting a whiteboard and drawing it. And I use this as an example to show that people like to learn and do things in a certain way. Right. And if you are going to approach your partner with the way that you get it done, and we, believe it or not, talk about how we approach things all the time. We are oil and water with how we approach stuff, right?
Yeah.
And
we work incredibly differently.
Yeah, it's very frustrating at times. It just gets done. No. But the point here is, if you can meet your partner where they're at and find out and have the perspective, put yourself in their shoes for a minute. Like, yeah, I know Heather doesn't want to start the conversation with X. I know my partner works best if we're, again, having a cocktail. Like, this is the activity we like to do. Just pay particular focus. Take a minute to think about not yourself, but how your partner learns. And they should be doing the same, and watch what happens at that point. You will have constructive, meaningful conversations at the right time, in the right place, getting to the right conclusions.
In addition to a money date, do you have a date or a structure around planning for domestic activities?
I don't think there is a better system out there than Eve Rodsky's Fair Play. And the cards there, she breaks down I think it's more than 100 household tasks and responsibilities into micro cards, and then you can divide them up. And I think for us, it's a very helpful exercise, but we don't stick to things like that, like the gospel at this point, because we don't really need to anymore. For us, one of the most important concepts, and actually this was also from Fair Play, and this was one of Eve Rodsky's amazing.
You're going to say owning the activity, aren't you?
Do you want to say it?
No, go for it. No, you're on a roll here.
Right. No, one of the most important things about how you do divide up household responsibilities is to make sure that you own that activity. And so it's this idea of conceptualize, plan, and execute. And I think many women feel frustrated with this idea when their spouse comes to them and says,
how can I help?
Just tell me what to do and I'll do it.
Yeah.
And that to me is like, oh my God, there's nothing more infuriating than that, because then you've just added yourself into the roster of my children standing in front of me with me being like, get your shoes on, take out the trash, and you put your coat away.
Yeah, but I'm actually going to do it.
Right. But the mental load is maybe heavier than half of the physical responsibilities that we all have. So for someone to really own an activity from start to finish is the most valuable thing that they can do. 100%. So I'll give you a great example from our own lives. Our older daughter, Hazel, is on a competitive swim team, and there's like a million emails, and it starts off season. You get the emails, time trials, bathing suits, it's a million different signups, meets. I said to Doug, I want nothing to do with swim. I don't want to go to practice. I don't want to read the emails because there's so many of them and they're confusing. I don't want to buy anything for swim. All I want to do is do what the dads do at a lot of the activities. I want to show up,
put a chair down,
and cheer Hazel on.
Say less, fam. Swim dad is here.
So that's how Swim Dad was born. And he doesn't, and I think the important thing too is he doesn't get it right 100% of the time, but I don't get it right 100% of the time either. I can't get on him though, and I can't step in and fix it and try and do it for him. If he forgets something, I tell him that he forgot and that he's got to do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I feel bad. I feel bad I forgot, because I've taken true ownership over this entire thing. It's not something I want to hear, is that I missed something, especially when you're dialed into it.
But you know what's crazy is that him becoming Swim Dad started off this effect into other things where he realized I can take ownership over something from start to finish. I'm not a man-kept man-child who needs to be told what to do and where to be all the time. That actually, I don't need to wait for Heather to say, if she's still upstairs working and it's 6 o'clock at night and the kids need dinner, I'm going to make dinner.
Well, I think the point is it builds upon itself, right? It creates better behaviors and habits in all areas of your participation in your family and in your life. And that's a really good thing. And I think it's also very important to point out here, I'm probably not going to stop the question of, what can I do to help? But when you are taking big pieces off the plate and you're lightening the mental load and these things that are clearly, being thrusted upon you more so than they're me, it allows for there to be more forgiveness and slack for the inevitable times I will say, how can I help? What can I do here? To just tell me what to do. I just don't want people to feel like this all magically goes away. It comes back to the idea of practice and building the habits and behaviors. These are things you are playing long. Your whole relationship is a long game, right? And I took that lesson from building businesses, from looking at our relationship. This is something that we are going, and particularly with money. It's one of the longest games. You have to deal with it forever. You don't get to opt out.
Yeah.
Right? You're not going off the grid in Montana, and opting out of, money.
Yeah.
You still need money to buy supplies to do that.
And even if you were,
you still
even that has costs.
Yeah,
to it.
you literally can't do it. And, unless you're trying to nuke your relationship, and that's the worst outcome, I think, of any, situation here, you don't get to opt out of these things. You have to figure out ways to make them work. And that gets back to fairness. So, yeah, it's never going to, there is no perfect here, right? There's never going to be, sorry, honey, there's not going to be a day where I'm not, bothering you about that. But as long as she knows I am continuing to show the types of actions that make our lives more fair, it's okay. It's okay. I'll be given that grace, as opposed to, could you just once take care of this from beginning to end? That's what that sounds like. It's not good.
One thing that strikes me, so both of you have developed quite a lot of wisdom around what makes a relationship work. When you talk about how resentment is like poison for a relationship, or when you talk about the importance of fairness as a guiding value. One thing that strikes me, though, is you met as freshmen in college, so you have not had a string of failed adult relationships. And most of my friends have told me that their biggest relationship lessons have come from the failures. They've come from the painful breakups that they had at the age of 23, and then at 27, and then at 31, and then at 36. Without a string of failures, how have you been able to form that level of wisdom?
I do think we've had a string of failures.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think
we've had a string of failures.
Yeah, I don't think it
we
takes...
We failed each other on numerous occasions early in our relationship. And
Sure.
I think that by growing into adults together, we were unfair to each other on numerous occasions. We made tons of mistakes. I tell people all the time that I feel like we lived the life cycle of some marriages before we even got married because of how close we got to this not working out early in our relationship. So I don't ever intend. And look, our book is not a memoir.
Yeah.
So I wish it was. Tell it to my editor. You know what I mean? Like
this is now our memoir.
This is no. But it's important because I think, with the focus on money and on these topics, we have to keep it focused on these topics. However, to be very clear, we were messy AF, and the fact that our relationship survived into adulthood took an insane amount of work, rebuilding trust. We had to get to know each other.
Heartbreak.
We had to get to know each other all over again on more than one occasion. And when I moved up to New York, it was very much a see you later situation. So this was not all sunshine and roses, and I think nothing is though. Like, right? I mean, that's the point, is that we kind of move through these seasons of our lives, and so we've definitely shared different seasons of our lives together.
I think the thing here is that when you find perhaps, we got into financial infidelity as part of a chapter. It's called the chapter on lying, and the psychologist that we talked to in that chapter, we asked the question of, how do you know when it's game over and it's time to move on? And they told us that when one person is not willing to do the work in the relationship to get it back on track or to fix whatever damage took place. And that's about as accurate as it gets. And in all the instances where we had our struggles and, moments that we would consider losses and not wins, we have yet to find ourselves in a position where one of us was unwilling to put in the work to move it on. So I don't think you necessarily need to see our relationship crumble to extract the lessons that life will inevitably give you. There is no successful entrepreneur. There is no successful marriage. There's nothing that is there's nothing that has resulted into success that hasn't come from a bunch of failures.
I should also add, and this is, Doug and I both are now products of divorce at this point in our life. And I think we both at various times in our life felt like we were each other's family. This isn't just, he's not just a guy that I'm dating.
We had to fill some pretty
We filled holes in each other's lives.
Yeah.
Maybe holes that were too big for somebody our age to be filling.
Yeah. Not sure it was necessarily fair for us to be in that position, but in life, you don't get to choose those things.
But I think it's an important point to further Doug's point, which is that there are lots of ways to rupture and repair relationships. And I don't necessarily think that people who have had 5 horror stories of past boyfriends have more context than the people who have been through some pretty hard stuff together and have still found a way through. Your story is your story. That's why we share so many other people's stories as well, not just our own. I would never hold us out as the shining example of people who have always gotten it right. Like I think
I would.
If I think if anything, I mean, and it's how I choose to hold myself out in the world too, is that I'm not. I'm messy. I get it wrong all the time. I don't say the right thing.
You have to.
And I'm a little unkempt. And it is what it is. Like, and I think that is why we're able to have real conversations and also connect with real people, because they see pieces of themselves in these stories and in these, not just ours, but others, because there's a million different ways to get to the desired result. And there's a million different experiences that get people to where they want to be. So,
Doug, your parents were married for 36 years before they got divorced.
Something like that, yeah.
So you were in your 30s at the time.
Yes.
Tell me about, how did that land with you? I mean,
it
must have been a huge shock.
I think the good side of that is I was a mature adult with a kid and had a family of my own. So my perspective, unlike Heather at the tender age of 13 or 14 when her parents got divorced, I understood more of how the world worked and how relationships work. But putting that aside, it still really rocks you to your core. I took a lot of pride in that while watching my friends' parents get divorced. I mean, boomers really went for the whole 50-50 split here on who stayed together and who left. That's very different from their parents who, if you hated your spouse, you still stayed together. Just what it was. It took an emotional toll for sure. I thought one of the core pillars of my life, which was my parents being together, despite knowing for many, many years they were unhappy, and there were probably times which I thought this thing's cooked, right? This is over, but they kept going. But to see it finally, fall apart in the way that it did, made me question a lot of things, about my childhood, about, what I thought, family was supposed to be. But again, just as we said, you take these struggles, you take these moments, and thank God I had Heather there, who, by the way, because of her experience through this, was maybe one of the most supportive things I had in my life. Not just because she was my wife and she was there for me, because she had the experience and arguably had it worse.
That's what's so crazy is that
she could tell me that, hey, here's what you're going through. I get it. That meant the world.
He helped me through so much. Like, oh my God, almost a decade and a half earlier.
Yeah.
And I was able to do the same for him, but in a totally different context.
Yeah. I think, at the end of the day, it gave us one more thing that we now have in common. Not necessarily the thing you want to have in common, but we're able to look at what had happened in our respective lives and draw lessons from it.
That's right.
Be able to share feelings around it and tap into areas that maybe we weren't talking about enough. There'll be a moment where I'm like, man, I really wish, my dad was able to see whatever it may be that I've done, or be able to communicate, or I wish I had my parents together for this moment, whatever it may be. And it sounds cliche, but it's true, right? And she'd be like, yeah. Let me tell you why you feel that way. Let me tell you what I do to get through that. You know what? Forget all that. Let's grab the girls and go out to dinner. within 30 minutes, I ain't thinking about that anymore. Look at what I have in front of me, and that's awesome.
Earlier, you talked about how through your relationship, you've been through some tumultuous ups and downs. And what that means is that you've both had to practice forgiveness over the years. Forgiveness of each other, forgiveness of yourselves.
Yes.
How do you do that?
It's not easy. It's not easy. And I think that we can only do so much for one another. I think one of the most important things you can do, though, is to understand how deep something is cutting your partner. I think you need to understand how big of a deal this is, whatever the thing is. Like, know how big that cloud is that's over them. Then you can tailor your support to meet them in that moment. And yeah, you may not be able to do it alone. This is why we call upon the help of so many professionals. I go to therapy. Doug goes to therapy. There are reasons why professionals exist to help you through these difficult moments in your life. I mean, like, we can only forgive each other so much if you don't forgive yourself. And I've needed help with that over time, not just in terms of whatever was going on with us, but in terms of even just the student loan debt. The shame I carried for the decisions that I made were really, really, the shame was really, really deep.
Yeah.
And
I double down on this, by the way. Forgiving yourself, I think, is sometimes harder than forgiving them. By the way, baby, I forgive you. No, I think forgiving yourself for the things that you believe you've done to yourself, or the way that you've put, certain types of feelings on you. They could be things that you've inherited, and sometimes you don't even know where it's coming from. And Heather's point about you rely on other professionals, you rely on the support systems in your life,
but and
to get there.
And to the point about knowing where your partner's at, when you know somebody so well, you can recognize them falling back into patterns. Like, there are things I am always going to be hard on myself. That's who I am. I set incredibly high expectations of myself. Professionally, personally, physically. As a woman, I set high expectations of myself. And they're not fair. Like, some of them are not always fair.
We talk about it all.
And when Doug catches me in a moment of kind of like spiraling into one of these things on myself, he's like, hey, you're doing that thing that you do. And I see where this is going, and you are losing the joy in this moment that we're in. You know how hard it is, like, when you're launching a book, like, out into the world, not to get all meta, but like the pressure, because this is something that I care about so incredibly deeply. Like, this project, this book, Doug has a firm. Yes, it's our firm. Yes, we did a lot of this together, and I do embrace the we and everything like this. But this project is very personal to me. It's very important. And it's really, really easy for me to slide into some very negative patterns of, like, expectations being, outsized from reality on what I want for myself. And I rely on him to check me in those moments too. So like, yes, therapists, yes, family and supportive people who love you, and most of all your partner, to kind of give you that check and to say, have you called your therapist about this? Because I think you probably should.
I can tell you one thing, even when Heather checks me on stuff that are habits or my own spiraling, if you want to call it that, is nobody really likes to hear it. So it takes a lot of bravery, and it takes a lot of confidence, and it takes a lot of knowing your partner
and trust
that, hey, I'm going to say something that's really not going to make you feel good, but the reason for that is it's right.
And then you need to have the trust in your partner to say, I really didn't like to hear that, but I know that they wouldn't be saying it if it wasn't true, or if their perception of this wasn't like, I would say, I observe you're doing this thing that you used to do, and I know that it's not going to be productive for us. I'm just telling you what I see.
Yeah.
And there has to be enough trust on both ends of him saying, well, for her to say this, she hasn't said something like that to me.
Yeah. She's not trying to, like, hurt my feelings. And after I say it, I hide behind the couch and throw little chocolates at her from a distance until it all goes away. Just kidding.
But it's true.
Yeah.
It's true. There has to be enough trust to really,
that's a really good point.
To really not only check each other, but to fall back on each other when you do fall into those old patterns, because there's a reason that you were that way. Like healing, again, just like your career isn't linear, healing isn't linear too. Like these things are embodied. Like these are like some of these feelings I have are like one step away from genetic. Like
yeah.
They run
well,
so deep.
That's why we say the self-work is the hardest work, because again, hearing things that, aren't your best qualities. I even think today I pointed out something that wasn't my best quality and I got all bent out of shape around it. And after a second to breathe, I said, I am fully aware. Being called out on something that was an old habit or behavior or something I don't like about myself made me extra sensitive to that. So as much as I want to fix things and get them solved in a second, sometimes you got to take a minute to reflect upon it, but it does take an incredible amount of trust and bravery to do some of these things. But I think that's a wonderful example of how far your relationship can go if you can get to a point of communicating that way.
Well, and one other point I'll make on that, which is, it's really about all of it, is that couples work, when it comes to money or anything else, involves a lot of self-work. It really requires a level of self-awareness. Like, you are not an enigma for your partner to figure out. It's not just their job.
Yeah, take them there.
It's your job too. You have an obligation to yourself. And that goes with money, right? With stepping into your power around money, being sure that you not only know, but that understanding that you have an obligation to know. Not just the ins and outs of your personal finances, but to know what you want out of life, to try and start asking yourself those hard questions. How can your partner begin to figure out those? Your partner can't figure out what those things are for you. You've got to figure out what they are for yourself, and then you two can work on it together. So like, I never want to lose that in this work. And I think because so many people, so many partners lose themselves in their marriage. They lose themselves in a relationship, or they lose themselves to their kids. And so when I look at this work, it is not just about talking to your partner. We talk about fairness. How can we even begin to talk about fairness when you're not being fair to yourself? When you're not setting a bar for yourself to say, I deserve to have my needs met. Here's the baseline of how I'm going to do that. And then we can start to work together.
It sounds like the real backbone of all of this is emotional maturity, agency, awareness. Like that's the life's work of holding a family together.
Yes.
Well, thank you for spending this time with us. Where can people find you if they'd like to learn more?
Now you're going to look at me?
Listen. You Google it. No. If you're interested in learning more about the book, you can go to domoneytogether.com. We also write a weekly newsletter on joint finances called The Joint Account, and that's at readthejointaccount.com.
Over on Substack, but also our book, Money Together, is available anywhere you like to purchase books.
Absolutely. Grab a copy.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. And we will link to all of that in the show notes as well.
Thanks so much.
Wonderful.